Good morning and happy Pride! Woo! So it is a pleasure to welcome you to Governor Cuomo's Pride Breakfast as we celebrate the LGBTQ community. Before we begin, I would like to recognize some of the special guests with us here tonight, and there are today. It's not tonight yet. That comes later. There are quite a number of special guests, so please, if you can save your applause until the end. We have a lot of very important people that I hugely admire here, and I want to make sure I mention every single one of them. To start, we've got Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul, Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney, New York City Public Advocate Letitia James, I know, you can't help it, they're so popular. Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer, Senator Brad Hoylman. From the New York State Assembly, we have our friend Dick Gottfried, Felix Ortiz, Rebecca Seawright, Joanne Simon, and Latrice Walker. And from, oh, this is a fun group here. From the New York City Council, we have our friend and our ally, and more than that, City Council Speaker Corey Johnson. We also are so lucky to have Daniel Drum, woo! Vanessa Gibson, Barry Gordenchik, Richie Torres, woo! And former councilman and forever friend, Jimmy Vaca. Oh, and I apologize, Mark Levine. I know you and I love you. Thank you, Corey. We also have Yonkers City Council member, Michael Sabatino. Woo! And from Labor, we have Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers. We have Jill Ferrillo, executive director of the New York State Nurses. Let's hear it for the nurses. We have Judge Paul Feinman, who's the first openly gay judge appointed to the Court of Appeals by Governor Cuomo. We have Christina Johnson, Chancellor of State University of New York. That's SUNY. We have Tony Award-winning actor, singer, producer, and advocate. He looks fabulous than anyone else here, I'm sorry to say, if you are vying for that. We have Billy Porter. We also have, this is very important, we also have with us and are lucky to have Judith Kaysen Windsor, wife of the late Edie Windsor. We have Terry DiCarlo, who's the former executive director of the LGBT Center in Orlando. We also have Alfonso David, you know him, counselor to the governor. I always say counselor, counsel to the governor. It's different. Kelly Cummings, deputy chief of staff. Rose Harvey, commissioner, Office of Parks and Recreation and Historic Preservation. Guillermo Linares, acting president of Higher Education Services Corporation. Roberta Reardon, commissioner of the Department of Labor. No, Roberta. Lourdes Zapata, chief diversity officer. David Contreras Turley. That's embarrassing, David. I'm sorry. Director of Constituency Affairs. We have Ross Levi, Executive Director of Tourism for the Empire State Development. We have Wendy Stark, Executive Director of Callen Lord. And I want to thank, because I can already see there are too many of you and I'm going to forget people, I want to thank all the LGBTQ executive directors, community leaders, and advocates and allies with us here today. That includes Judge Doris Ling Cohen. Thank you very much. And that, of course, includes, he needs no introduction, but just in case you've been under a rock, David Mixner. So this morning, we will see a brief video about the new LGBT monument that opened today in Hudson River Park. We will then hear from Governor Cuomo, Speaker Corey Johnson, AFT President Randy Weingarten will then say a few words, and then Counselor to the Governor, Alfonso David, will recognize some of the people who made the LGBT monument possible. Now, 2 years ago, the entire nation was shaken by the shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando that took the lives of 49 people. In the wake of that tragedy, Governor Cuomo called for a moment to honor the victims of the Orlando shooting and all victims of hate, intolerance, and violence. Earlier this morning, Governor Cuomo unveiled the extraordinary new LGBT monument in the Hudson River Park that stands as a symbol of New York values. Please turn your attention to the screens for a brief video.
America is just now coming to grips with what unfolded here in the early morning hours in Orlando, a massacre at a gay nightclub,
killing 49 people and injuring 68 others, making it the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history.
Parents, sons, daughters, and loved ones of so many.
Terrifying moments for people who had to live through the ordeal and watch their friends die.
I saw his eyes roll back, and he let go of my hand.
He said he has us and he's going to kill us, and that was it.
My son hasn't been heard from, so I don't know if he was left in the club, if he got shot, or if he's being worked on here.
There are more than a list of names. There are people who loved and were loved. There are people with families and friends and dreams.
When we heard about Orlando, it touched each and every one of us because it went to the core of who we are and what we believe. It was everyone's neighbor, everyone's brother, everyone's sister. It has opened the eyes of this world to the injustice that is still done against the LGBT community. We want a monument built to the victims of Orlando and the victims of hate crimes everywhere. We want this terrible event remembered, and we want the lesson learned so it never happens again. The thousands who showed up in front of Stonewall almost spontaneously were there united with an energy and a positivism that was palpable. It just radiated through the crowd. Sometimes from the greatest pain comes the greatest progress. Stonewall was not without pain. New York has become a sanctuary for people seeking asylum because they were different and they were diverse. And along with that sanctuary came the role of being a champion. New York's role is to stand up and fight. I'm not saying the fight is over. There is still discrimination. There are still stereotypes. There's still fear. There's still hate. It lives in the shadows throughout society. But it will never show its face in the light of day in the state of New York.
I want to acknowledge we have Stuart Applebaum, president of the RWDSU. It would not be a party without Stuart. Thank you for being here. This morning, I have the opportunity to introduce you to an ally of the LGBT community and a national progressive leader, Governor Andrew Cuomo. The governor has been a strong supporter of the center, and he has also been an essential partner in our efforts to fight for a brighter future for the LGBTQ community in New York. He meets with us and listens to our concerns, and he understands the challenges that the LGBT community faces. And I just want to say, as someone in this movement that stands here in June, when we have an administration in Washington that does not recognize our existence, to be able to be in New York State, where we have a governor that not only recognizes, but celebrates us, is nothing short of amazing. And thanks to his leadership, we have achieved huge progress here in New York. Under Governor Cuomo, New York is a beacon for progressive action and can be an example for other states to follow. I am positive the history books will show that Andrew Cuomo is one of the greatest advocates for justice and equality, and so it is my pleasure to introduce the 56th governor of New York State, Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Thank you. Happy Pride. Is there anybody in the room that Glenda Testone did not acknowledge? I mean, Glenda Testone, she is such a champion, such an advocate, such an inspiration to all of us. Let's give Glenda a big round of applause. Our great speaker, who when I was sitting next to him, I stopped him from eating the cupcake. As soon as I got up, he has now inhaled the cupcake. But he is a great city leader. Speaker Corey Johnson, let's give him a round of applause. Our Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul. Our national champion for labor and working families and individual rights and for the LGBTQ community, Randy Weingarten. We're going to hear from Stuart Applebaum. Let's give him a round of applause. My counsel, Alfonso David, I like to say that he's the brains of the operation and I'm the good looks of the operation. He likes to say he's the brains and the good looks of the operation. Alfonso David, let's give him a round of applause. As you heard from Glenda, we just opened a memorial on the Hudson River Park, right on the Hudson River, in sight of the Statue of Liberty, that you must see. You must see. It is breathtaking, and it is powerful. It remembers the 49 lives lost in Orlando, but it remembers all the people who have suffered from hate and ignorance and bigotry. And it is truly an inspiration, and I'm proud that we have it prominently on Hudson River Park, right there in view of the Statue of Liberty. That's where it should have been, and that's where it is. 48 years of the Pride Parade. Next year is the 50th year since Stonewall. It has been a long and a rough and bumpy journey. Some years we come together during the Pride Parade and we are mourning. Some years we came together and we were talking about comforting one another. Some years we came together to advocate. Some years we came together to celebrate. 7 years ago today, New York State passed marriage equality and changed. And when New York acts, it makes a difference in the entire nation. And when we passed marriage equality, it changed the dialogue all across this nation, he says with the arrogance of a New Yorker. But it's also true. So congratulations to you for getting it passed. Today in this parade, we mourn the Orlando 49. We honor Edie Windsor and what she did, and we memorialize her. What a champion. But we also come together to mobilize against the extreme conservative wave that is taking over this country. And it's an extreme conservative wave that starts in Washington, D.C., and is rippling all across this nation. And what it's trying to do is take our greatest strength, which is our diversity and our differences, and demonize those differences. And that, my friends, is spreading a cancer in the body politic. Because this nation is all about differences. We are unique on the globe. We're the one place that's not about one race, one religion. We said, come one, come all. We invited people of different countries and different religions and different colors of skin to come to this country, and we said we would forge one in commonality from that diversity. And when you now say the diversity is a negative, well, then you are putting wedges all throughout society. And that's what they're doing. They are anti-LGBTQ. They made it clear from day one. They made it clear when, as soon as they got into the White House, they said that the Department of Defense should discharge transgender people regardless of merit, just because they're transgender. They said it when they went to the Department of Education and they rolled back protections for transgender youth. They said it when they went to the Department of Justice and rolled back protections against discrimination on the basis of gender identity. They did it when they applauded the court case allowing the Colorado baker not to make a cake for an LGBTQ marriage. I don't know what they're thinking in Colorado. I don't know what ingredients they put in their cake. I don't know what their recipe is for their cake. But I can tell you this, there's no hate in our cake in New York. That's for sure. I like that. No hate in my cake. Says it all. And it's not just anti-LGBTQ. They are against anyone who is different. It's the travel ban. It's anti-Muslim. It's abandoning the people of Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, even though they're American citizens. All they saw was Puerto Rican. Different language, different skin color, different accent. An extreme conservative, because it's not just their view. They want to impose their view on you. And that's what makes them frightening, and that's what makes them dangerous, and that's why they have to be stopped, and that's why New York has to be the state to do it. Because it will spread, and it is spreading. You have more Ku Klux Klan groups today than you did 5 years ago, more anti-white supremacist groups than we've had before. 80% increase in New York on anti-Semitic activity. That's what happens when you start to turn one against another. It becomes a cancer and an infection, and it runs all through the body, and that's what they're doing. It's not even that they're stopping. They are now planning a rollback on a President Obama health care protection, which would allow health care companies to discriminate on the basis of gender identity, which means they could discriminate against transgender. And we say again in New York, no how, no way. I'm signing a regulation today that says, I don't care what the federal government says, you do not discriminate against anyone on the basis of race, color, creed, sexual identification. You do not discriminate against the LGBTQ community. It will not happen in New York, period. And for every step the Trump administration takes backwards, New York is going to take two steps forward. They want to roll back protections. We're the state that said we're going to end the AIDS epidemic by 2020 and we're going to save lives. We're the state that said we have a hate crimes task force, and if you commit a hate crime in this state, you're going to be prosecuted and you're going to pay a heavy penalty, because we have no tolerance for prejudice or discrimination, period. And we're going to make that known and enforce those laws. We protect transgender children in our education system, and we always will. We're going to protect LGBTQ members in our healthcare system, and we always will. And we're going to lead the way forward in all of these issues. At a time when the nation is feeling this turmoil and feeling this hate and anger coming from Washington, this negativity, this judgmentalism, this divisiveness, New York has to be the safe harbor and the alternative path. Let them talk about hate. We will talk about love. Let them talk about discrimination. We will talk about community and coming together. Let them talk about intolerance. We will show tolerance. We have the lady in our harbor, and the lady in our harbor said everything that needed to be said about this country. Opportunity for all. Acceptance of all, discrimination of none, and from individuality we will form community, respecting the individuality and celebrating the diversity, but coming together as one community. And that's what makes us strong and special as a nation. And New York says we can do that. 19 million people, gay, straight, black, white, brown, all across the world, we have representatives here. And yes, we celebrate our individuality, but we are one state and one nation. And let New York State be the alternative reality to Trump's America, because we're not going there. Thank you, and God bless you.
I ate the cupcake, I ate the bagel. I'm gonna dance a lot, so I need some energy. Thank you, Governor Cuomo. Before I make some very brief remarks, I wanna acknowledge, of course, the members of the City Council who are here. I want to acknowledge Councilmember Mark Levine, Councilmember Richie Torres, Councilmember Barry Grudenchik, Councilmember Vanessa Gibson, and the Queen of Queens, Councilmember Danny Drum. It is a pleasure to be here with the governor to celebrate Pride. I have been to Prides all over the country, and to me, New York is the most special celebration in our entire country. New York is considered, as you all know, the birthplace of the modern LGBTQ rights movement. And when we marched past Stonewall today, being on the streets of Greenwich Village, the energy, it is one of my favorite days of the entire year. And we are fortunate to have leaders like Governor Andrew Cuomo, who understand that New York's legacy and who continue to uphold New York's legacy today. Under Governor Cuomo's leadership, New York State has been a beacon of progress for the entire country. It was Governor Cuomo who led the fight to give all New Yorkers the chance to marry who they love. And I just want to provide a little bit of context on this point so people really remember it. 7 years ago, there was no Windsor decision. 7 years ago, there was marriage equality in a handful of states that was court-ordered by those state Supreme Courts. There wasn't a governor or a state legislature that was actually able to, through the legislative progress, especially with a divided legislature, Democrats controlling the Assembly and Republicans controlling the Senate, there wasn't another instance of a marriage equality bill being shepherded through in the governor was in office less than a year and a half at that point. He was at the beginning of his first term. And he put his full weight behind getting this done. He went around the state. He didn't just talk about it in nice rooms in Chelsea or in Greenwich Village. He went to Buffalo and Rochester and Albany and all over the state talking about this. And those 4 Republican state senators who voted for marriage equality and who were on the right side of history, Governor Cuomo was one of the key people who sat with them individually to tell them the impact that this would have on people's lives and how they should be proud of their legacy by casting this vote. It's important for us to remember that 7 years ago, New York State and our country was a different place. And in that different time, Governor Cuomo led the way. And I want to thank him once again for his leadership. Now, he was a little too humble this morning because the amount of progress that has happened again with a divided legislature where we haven't been able to get things through in the way we've wanted to, he has had to, under the state constitution and his executive powers, take a series of actions that we wish the legislature would take. But when they haven't acted, he has acted. Governor Cuomo banned the deplorable practice of conversion therapy. He banned discrimination against transgender people when they wouldn't pass gender. He strengthened health care and insurance regulations to protect transgender New Yorkers from being discriminated against. He nominated, and I'm seeing him right here with that beautiful tie on, he nominated the first openly gay person to serve on the highest court in the state of New York, our friend Paul Feynman. And being the only openly HIV positive elected official in the state of New York and one of, I think, 3 or 4 in the entire country, New York State, and it's important for us not to forget this, New York State has literally led the way, more than any other state in the country, more than the federal government, has led the way on ending the epidemic and scourge of HIV and AIDS, which is a big deal. And people should know that since the beginning of the epidemic, last year we had the lowest level of new HIV infections ever recorded since the beginning of the epidemic. And because he knows violence against the LGBT community is a constant threat, Governor Cuomo created the Hate Crimes Task Force to fight the increase in reports in bias-motivated threats, harassment, and violence. And thanks to Governor Cuomo, New York City is now home to a beautiful and profound, I see my friend Anthony Goiconlea over there, the artist, a beautiful and profound new memorial honoring the LGBT community and symbolizing the ideals of equality and tolerance that we hold dear here in New York City. I just want to end with this. It's not easy being governor. It's a big state, which has had to tackle a lot of problems that are non-LGBT related. And the governor has done it with fortitude, with aplomb, with compassion. And every time an issue has come up that is related to our community, he hasn't been had to ask a second time. He intuitively, instinctively gets it. He got it when he was Attorney General of the state of New York. He got it when he was Secretary of HUD. He's gotten it as our governor, and I am really proud that hopefully, I know this is a government event, so we can't talk too much about politics, hopefully we have a new state legislature next year, and we're going to be able to achieve a lot with his leadership up in Albany. We're going to be able to get more done, which is why there was an article this morning in the Daily News. I am proud to support Governor Andrew Cuomo for re-election. Thank you very much. It is my honor to introduce the president of the American Federation of Teachers, our friend, the amazing, and the other half of Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum, Randy Weingarten.
And now I am tall. It's amazing. So I want to just build on what Corey just said, because I see things from around the country. And I thought 10 years ago, when I became the first openly gay president of an international union, that it was going to be a tough time. But never have I seen in the United States, in the modern era, what we have seen right now. And that is why I am incredibly honored to be here today for Pride. We really have in New York State hope in darkness, and that is what today is about. And the LGBTQ community in New York is an essential part of who we are as New Yorkers. But the state has always been in the forefront of the LGBTQ rights movement. It was not just Stonewall, it was so many other things. But today, under the governor's leadership, and with the support, as you see, of organized labor across the state, this state continues to lead the nation in the fight to expand and to protect the rights of all New Yorkers. And since the governor became governor, I have watched him be dedicated to lifting up the LGBTQ community, to defending the rights of our community as well as all New Yorkers. And frankly, from this out lesbian, it's hard to imagine that what we have accomplished in the last 8, 10, 20 years. And I'm glad that Judith is here, because today we recognize Edie Windsor. The state has recognized June 20th as the Edie Windsor Day, but who would have thought 15, 20 years ago that that would have happened? And I also remember Connie Kurtz and her partner Ruth Berman for suing the New York City Department of Education for health benefits. And for us, the UFT, and myself as its lawyer, being able to use that suit to negotiate domestic partnership benefits back only in 1993. But I also remember, and there he is, Danny Drum, when the District 24 school board wanting to fire Danny because he was gay. And our union stepping up and saying, with the clout of the UFT, you try to fire him, you reckon with the entire United Federation of Teachers. And now, Danny Drum is the finance chair. I love that, Queen of Queens. The finance chair of the City Council. But I will never forget the day that the governor signed marriage equality. I had been involved as the UFT president in many of the earlier failed attempts. And I remember reactions from legislative friends that it was too early, or even, and I'm sure David's heard many of these things too, much, much worse. And it was Andrew Cuomo's leadership and his particular brand of negotiations and being able to get things done that got that across the the finish line. It was not easy, and I thank you, Governor, for doing that. I was in Cairo that night when it passed the legislature at an international forum, because Tahrir Square had just happened and the Arab Spring had just happened, and we had this hope that things would change around the world. And I remember trying an intermittent internet and radio to find out what that vote was, and you, my friend, were responsible for that vote, and I thank you for it. Hope in darkness. That's what we have in New York. And I also want to publicly thank the governor for one more thing, even though it is off topic, which is this. His actions fighting the separation of children from their parents, fighting the caging of children. This community knows more than most that when immigrants are demonized, we have been demonized. We need to help and fight and stop that. And this governor has not only borne witness, but he has used the rights and the laws of New York State to try to stop that, and I want to thank you for that. Hope in darkness. That is what we have in New York. That is what we need to keep doing. And with that, I want to introduce one of my dear colleagues, another member of our labor tribe and our LGBTQ tribe, Stuart Applebaum.
Good morning, everybody. Governor, from the bottom of my heart and with deepest sincerity, I want to thank you. In a world that has gone terribly awry, in a country that has gone terribly awry, you have kept New York a welcoming place for all of us and for so many people who make up the fabric of the state. The year I was born, the American Psychiatric Association said that homosexuality was abnormal sexual behavior. And I would have never have imagined at that point, that all these years later, we would be gathering here together. There are two lessons I learned from that. The first is that change, incredible change, is possible and can happen. Change that we may not even be able to conceive of at the time is possible. And the second thing I learned from that is that we had a lot of support for our community from many other communities. And what we must realize is that justice is indivisible. You can't be for justice for some and not be for justice for all. And at this moment, the people who need it more than anyone else, besides workers with incredible income inequality facing us, the people who need it are immigrants. This evening, I'm flying to Salem, Ohio to meet with people who were detained by ICE earlier this week. The RWDSU, my union, represents 2,000 workers who work at a meat processing plant in Ohio. On Tuesday, ICE showed up with their guns brandished, putting them in people's faces, machine guns, throwing people to the floor, helicopters hovering overhead. And they marched out 146 people who they detained and sent to detention camps. These are people who were very dangerous. They showed up at work to cut pork products and make bacon for Wendy's. And yet they were thrown to the floor and treated less than people. They did not go home. Their children were left in schools, did not know where they were. The families had no idea what was going on. And then a few days later, for 60 of them, they had to be released. And the government said, never mind. What was your crime? You showed up at work without carrying documentation papers, which you had. This is what's going on in our country right now. That is why what Governor Andrew Cuomo is doing is so important, not just for all of us, but for this entire country. Standing up and speaking out for immigrant workers, for children, just as he has done consistently for the LGBT community and for so many other communities, makes a difference. And it's the reason why I am so proud and continue to be so proud that Andrew Cuomo is the governor of New York, and his partner, Kathy Hochul, who is a wonderful friend of ours, is the lieutenant governor of the state. And so today, when we march in the parade, let us march not just for our own community, but for all communities, committed to justice for everyone. Thank you.
Oops. Oops, indeed. I know. Good morning, everyone. Happy Pride. So I'm standing between you and marching, and we will be very, very quick. As the Governor's Council, it has been my pleasure to serve in this administration, serve to advance the Governor's equality agenda. And it is not lost on me, serving as the first openly gay council in the history of this state, that this governor has made history time and time again. Two years ago, he signed an executive order creating an LGBT Memorial Commission. We would like to honor them this morning. I would like for all of them just simply to come up to the stage very quickly. Glenda Testone, Scott Campbell, Rose Harvey, Christina Herrera, Eunice Ortiz, Beverly Tillery, Kelsey Louie, Thomas Creever, and Melissa Sklarz. We would like to thank them for all of the work that they've done over the past year and a half, moving forward with this LGBT memorial that serves as a testament to all of us. Pride, let's march.